My story begins with, I came from a divorced family of 6 kids. At the age of 8, my parents split, and my mom and dad stopped going to church. My mom was broken, and because of her brokenness, she was in many different relationships, and she never trusted a man in her life anymore. And so I remember growing up, my mom used to always say, live with a man before you marry him. And then you will get to know what he's really like. And that's what I was always having in the back of my head. So as I got older and stuff, that's all I knew. So when I was 15 years old, I began dating. And by the age of 16, I became pregnant. I was supposed to get an abortion at that time. I went to the doctors, and I came home, and I told my mom that I was not going to have the abortion, and she was very upset with me, and she started screaming and yelling. I decided to keep my child. It was a little boy. I named him Michael, and so here I was, 16. His father was in our life for a very short time. He was an abuser. He abused me 3 times. And at the 3rd time, I realized that he was never going to change. I didn't want to raise my son watching his father abuse his mom. So I left. So here I am, 16 years old in this big world, all by myself, not knowing what to do. One thing led to another. And I just kept getting into bad relationships throughout my whole life. I was always looking for love and never finding it. I ended up with alcoholics, drug users, abusers, you name it, I had it. During that time when my son was very young, I was thanking God at that time that he was a baby, because I went without food. I've gone weeks without eating. I've gone without heat, electricity, everything that we take for granted today on our everyday life. I went without, and it just got worse and worse. At the age of 27 years old, anyways, I had my 2nd child, and she was a girl, and I named her Ashley. And her father was in our life for 9 years, but that was no good neither. He had his own issues and didn't know how to deal with them. And he slept all the time, and he never wanted to work. I was working 12 hours a day, and I was the one paying for the Christmas presents and putting food on a table. When I left him, he never looked back. He didn't care about his daughter. He was only thinking about himself. I never received child support from neither one of them. And my son never knew his dad, never. He was 3 months old when I left him. His father never looked him up. I was the mother and the father to my 2 children. Later on in life, I ended up in another relationship. That one I thought was the best one. But as that relationship went on, I realized that he was very selfish. But the thing is that I wanted to say is that I realized that these relationships I ended up in that were no good for me is because I was very insecure, because I had many bad things happen to me when I was a child. And we won't get into that. But because of my insecurities, I never felt that a good man could ever love me, that I was never good enough, especially an educated man, that he wouldn't even give me a second look. My mother used to say words to me, not realizing that they would hurt me as I got older in life. I had no respect for myself because I didn't know what that was. My mom didn't really have respect for herself because she was broken. There's no one to blame. I don't blame her. I don't hold nothing against her. I was living in a fairy tale my whole life. And all I remember when I was like 13 years old, I just wanted to have a husband and have a family. I lived in a fairy tale my whole life, and I never found him. In 2008, I was living with my boyfriend for 8 years, and we ended up moving to Texas. In Texas, he went to go work with his uncle on the road. And at that time, this man that I have loved for 8 years betrayed me with another woman for 6 months while I was home waiting for him. The night that he betrayed me, I knew it. I was disconnected from him completely. I spoke with him the next morning and I asked him if he cheated on me. And he said, no. Why did you ask? I said, I don't feel right. Something's wrong here. And he denied it. So anyways, at that time, my depression started because I knew that he betrayed me and my depression started kicking in. At this time, I began to question God. I used to believe in God because that's just what we did. We believed in God. But at this time, I started questioning him, and I used to ask him, why? Why do all these bad things happen to me? And I know that I was not a good girl, that I did many bad things in my life that I shouldn't have done. But I asked him, why does every man cheat on me? Every man in my life cheated on me, and I couldn't understand why. And it was then that I heard God for the first time. And his words to me was, I will never cheat on you. I went to the bookstore, and I knew I was looking for something. So I went down the Christian aisle, and I saw many books. I didn't know which one to buy. And then I came across a book called God is Faithful. And that's the one that I bought. And I began to read it, and that's when I started seeking God. I would read this book and be drawn to God. I never went without reading a book about God. Until this day, that's all I read is books about God. It was the beginning of our love story, mine and Jesus. I was learning on who this God was and the things that he can do for me. My friends asked me to go to church with her family, and since then, I never stopped. This pastor named Robert Morris taught me how to have a personal relationship with God just between me and God. Once I began to date this man named Jesus, it was then I realized I have finally met my prince. Our friendship grew so strong, and the way he treated me was something that I never experienced before in my life. And the great thing about this relationship is that I never had to sleep with him. It was Jesus who taught me how to respect myself and how to think, how to dress, and how to find my self-worth. Not only did he love me, but he was in love with me. As I had fallen in love with him, I'm still crazy about him. For once in my life, I felt so complete, and this is a feeling that I can never get from a man from this world. I don't have to look anymore because I found my true prince after 45 years. God had taught me to forgive later on. After my boyfriend had betrayed me, I had split up with him for about 5 months. And during that time, I was getting really deep with God, and God was really teaching me about forgiving. And it was hard, very, very hard. Anybody can say they forgive, but yet still hold it in their heart. And so it was a long and hard journey, but I listened to God and to my heart. I called this man back because I knew that we were all sinners. But more so, I never wanted to live my life wondering, what if? Because I think that too many people get divorced because they really don't listen to their hearts, because they're so hurt and they go by their emotions. But I didn't want to go through life wondering, what if we could have made it. I cried every day for almost 2 years. I cried every day. But then I had peace in my heart for this man, and I actually fell more in love with him afterwards, and it was beautiful. We moved back from Texas and began to live our life together, but at this time, I was still growing and getting to know God, and my man was not. He was never maturing. I was living with him when God spoke to me again, saying, I can't be that Christian woman and live with a man who is not my husband. Let's say I was in spiritual warfare at this time because God wanted me to trust him, and Satan was telling me that I would never make it on my own. I had no money or anything for that matter. All my stuff was still in Texas. But God kept telling me, if you love me, you will trust me. He just kept telling me, trust me. I will not bring you this far just to watch you fail. I will take care of you, but you have to trust me. Because during this time, that's all God was saying, and everything that I was reading was all about trust, trusting God. It was hard to trust anyone because of my past, but I knew I had to trust God. At this time, and I began to look for an apartment, not knowing where or how I was going to pay for anything, but I was trusting God. I looked at 3 apartments, and the last one I feel that God had chosen for me. I told, because I didn't know where to go, and I'm like, you want me to move? You pick it for me. And so I knew that God had chose the apartment He wanted me to live in because it was right next to a church. And that was His way of saying, this is the one. The manager, Ed, wanted a deposit, but I didn't have much money. I told him my story and why I needed to move, and he said, let me talk to the owner. He called me back and said, Suzanne, it's yours. We would love for you to stay. So on October 1st, 2011, I moved in and lived there for 2 years. Now, this just happened recently. God is so good, but true to His word. And that's what I wanted to get across this. God is true to His word, because when He says He is with you, He is with you 100%. He took care of me that whole time. I never went without paying my rent. My bills were met, and there were many. I did go without a TV or a microwave, but I didn't want them. People offered to give me these things, but I refused them. Because at this time, I was still getting to know God. And I just wanted to have that quietness in my apartment with Him. And just listening to radios, music, CDs, and it was just all about God. And during all this, I was a cashier at Lowe's. So I was not making much money at all. I had to learn to trust God, but He had to learn to trust me too. If you never knew Jesus before, here is your chance. I am introducing you to Jesus, because I think what's really sad is going through my whole life, nobody has never introduced me to Jesus. I heard that there is a God, but that's all there was a God. But I didn't know anything about Him. I didn't know about this Jesus and what He can do for me. And so I am introducing all of you to Jesus, so you can seek Him and see for your life. See for yourself if He doesn't change your life for the better. And girls, I found my prince, because it's one thing, girls, and this really goes out to the young girls who are pregnant and moms, and these young girls that are always looking for that man to love them and want to take care of them. And I've been there. And this message is really going out to these girls, because you know what? They don't need to look for that man anymore. They just need to find Jesus, because He will take care of them. And so I just don't believe in Him. I am in love with Him. And this, I just want to say thank you for being here and listening to my testimony. And God bless.
Amen.